First, my apologies for having to run off so quickly and leaving you with just my voice and some slides. But I could not possibly make the flight home, and I'm sorry that you are here still in the graveyard shift. Hopefully there's still some of you in the room. I don't know this, but I still would like to give some input for this session. I'd like to thank Marco and Debbie for giving me this space still. I would have understood if they wouldn't have done so. It's never nice to have a speaker in the program who then doesn't show up. So I really feel sorry for this. If Marco or Debbie can change the slides as I talk, that would be wonderful. Holistic approaches to sustainability in science. In higher education, that's what I would like to give some input to. Obviously, what we know nowadays is that we do live in times of uncertainty and complexity. Science needs to deal with that. There's confusing rhetoric about what is true. Scientists compete with one another. Distinction between fact and myth becomes blurry, and sometimes it's actually purposely created, the confusion about issues like climate change. Trust is eroding. At the same time, we also see that everybody is connected through the digital world, the internet. People look for quick answers, quick information, and students do that too, of course, in their courses. But so do staff and faculty members and teachers. Not a lot of time to go in depth in issues, quick answers, loss of attention spans, things like that. That's happening at the same time as Michael Apple talked about yesterday. Neoliberal economic forces accelerating inequity, emphasizing certain values, material values mostly, the age of consumerism, but also accountability, measurement. And one response that we see also in education for sustainability is that we at least need continuous learning, recalibrating what we need to be doing, how we can learn from the past and how we can anticipate better futures. And indeed, sense of place and identity are a part of that as well. So how then does education respond, and in our case higher education? We tend to look, there are basically two ways of responding, you could say. The incremental one that says that we have not a bad system, and that system has brought us many good things in life, and we just need to optimize that system, eliminating, for instance, that we do not value certain qualities economically, and if we only could do that, water, air, even meaning and spirituality, if we could kind of put a price on that, then it would all fit well in our market-driven, capitalist, neoliberal worldviews. It's just a matter of optimization versus a more transition-oriented approach that says, well, we need to really rethink the basic values and assumptions and the worldviews themselves if we are to live more sustainably on this planet. So optimization versus a transition approach, or doing the things we do better, or doing better things, you could say. You could also look at education in that same way, although in this slide is actually just an example of how this works for food security. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you can see that in the upper right corner, it's more the transition-oriented approach, where you need technological transitions as well as societal transitions of doing things altogether differently. Things like cradle-to-cradle, metropolitan agriculture when it comes to food and nutrition security represent that type of transition, shortening food chains, local foods, connecting with food in place. Whereas, say, the GMOs, genetically modified foods, are more a high-tech transition that may not be societally acceptable. So won't get, and reducing food waste, for instance, would be working within the same system that we're in. We just need to be more efficient. In education, I'll skip that one for time's sake. In education, you can look at it the same way. There are lots of incremental changes, curriculum greening, using digiboards, for instance, or you could say there are transitions that are more high-tech, the flipped classroom and MOOCs, that do require a different way of thinking, but are technologically driven. If you look at more at the transitions from a societal perspective, looking at alternative pedagogies, for instance, place-based education, social learning, those types of pedagogies, critical pedagogies, they require a transition in the way we think also about education. And in the upper right, you could think about learning ecologies, whole institution approaches that require transitions both technologically and at the societal levels in the cultures and minds of people and organizations. Stephen Sterling uses this denial on the lower left. We can just go on the way we've always worked, or adding it on little bits and pieces to optimize our system, or building it in that requires more a whole institution, a whole transition, or a whole system redesign, which is kind of a restructuring, rebuilding of our system on new assumptions and values. Now, a holistic approach to 21st century education, as we like to refer to change and innovation in education for the 21st century. It's already almost 15 years into it by now, but usually a holistic approach suggests we need to look at the content, new emerging themes, resilience, alternative development, or sustainability as an alternative to development, cradle to cradle, sustainable contraction. These are new ideas, content-related ideas that need to have a place somewhere in our education. But also new forms of research, like phronesis, reflexive practice, civic science, all important to consider if we want to rethink the relationship between science and society. Linking the university, higher education to what we call the Big Five, the world of business, the world of governance, world of education, world of research, and the world of civic society organizations and NGOs. They all need to co-create sustainability in a generative, interactive way. We also need to look at the place-based institutional practices, the way universities use energy, deal with waste, deal with inequity in its own systems, lack of democracy. We can talk about it, but if we don't mimic that in our own practices, it is not going to be a very powerful place for learning. And again, the pedagogical innovation will be required as well. If you do all that together, you could say there is a holistic approach to higher education when it comes to making it more sustainable and contributing to sustainability. Now at Wageningen University, and we're beginning to do this also at Gothenburg University, we kind of try to develop education, and we're going to research that in the coming years, that takes a transformative approach towards socio-ecological sustainability, where we, and I refer to Gert Bista's morning session for those of you who were there, where we try to build upon the past, try to act in the present using real sustainability challenges identified by the learners themselves, where they also identify the stakeholders who are affected by that and can make a change in that situation in the present, but also looking at possible futures, possible outcomes, without exactly knowing what the right answers are or what the right solutions are, exploring, backcasting, imagining futures where you work in a specific context, which is that locally rooted sustainability challenge, but you always look at the bigger global manifestations of those issues. And that type of transformative learning we try to facilitate by creating these, what we call transdisciplinary groups of students who work on societal challenges that tend to be sustainability related. There's implications for how we organize learning, how we design learning spaces, how we facilitate learning, how we assess that learning. And if you're interested in that, we've written a chapter about this in a book edited, Marco Rickman being one of the editors, on sustainability in higher education, a Springer handbook, and we have written about this in terms of socio-ecological innovation and the role of higher education in accelerating such innovation, although we should also critique a little bit the innovation framework, which suggests that we always must develop, renew, rethink, and that we can never be in a place or be happy where we are or with who we are, but that we must always develop, which could also be seen as problematic. So I'd like to add the word critical to that as well. Okay, I've talked already more than I should. Key points. I think we need to get better in designing and investigating the learning context and spaces that enable our students to develop embedded, unsustained abilities. And there will be more talk about what those abilities and competencies might be or look like, and associated capacities and qualities. We need to blur the boundaries between the institutional, the community-based, and the workplace learning. And these connections are essential and inevitable. How to co-create sustainability, how to engage in boundary crossing in a meaningful, generative way. We need to critical thinking, the taking for granted values and behaviors and systems need to be questioned if we are to transition towards a new way of doing things. The transitionary perspective has not been developed very well in higher education. And finally, the normative dimension, the values, the ethics underlying environmental and sustainability education needs to be strengthened if a transition perspective is to be taken seriously. Thank you for your attention, and I hope there will be some discussion about this. And again, apologies for not being with you. And I do wish all of you a safe and good trip back home.